Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Trish Vick. I am the immediate past president of Half Century Trojans. Um, the Half Century Trojans is a really vibrant community. If you graduated from college or university 50 years ago and also have a graduate or a undergraduate or a professional degree from USC, you're part of our Half Century Trojan community. Now, tonight's panel is an example of the Half Century Trojans' role in promoting Trojan spirit worldwide and lifelong. Our panel, Retirement Equals Retirement plus Renewment, is part of the Trojan Connects events this week, which is a global networking week, second annual one. Before we start, I have a laundry list of ways to explain how things work with the Zoom webinar works. I haven't done one before, so I'm glad I know they gave me this. All participants are muted and participants are not present on the screen, which is different from many times. You will have a Q&A because at the end of our session, you'll be able to answer your questions. But in this case, you're going to be doing your written questions in the Q&A. On my bar down here, my Q&A is to the right of the share button. So you're going to put it in your written questions in the Q&A. You're going to drop them in there. And as far as the chat's concerned, some of you have been using it during the interim time before we started. That's for you and the participants to communicate among themselves. And so that's the way that's going to work. Now, I want to get into my introductions because we have a fantastic panel today. We're very fortunate to have them, two really phenomenal women. And I could give an introduction for the whole session telling you about them, but to make it short and sweet. First of all, we have Jeanette Brown, who many of you already know, who is the Executive Director Emerita of the USC Emeriti Center, and she served as the Assistant Vice Provost until she retired in June of 2024. She is a USC Davis Gerontology Adjunct Professor member, and earlier in career, she was a USC certified coach. You may know her too from the USC Trojans because she's our Hall of Fame award recipient the year before last. She's also served as the executive director of the Association of Retirement Organizations of Higher Education. She has been involved with Renewment almost since its beginning, and that's one of the reasons we have her for our discussion tonight. Our second speaker is Helen Dennis, and Helen is the co-founder of Renewment along with Bernice Bratter. She is a recipient of numerous awards at USC for teaching at the USC Davis School of Gerontology. But more in recent times, she's a nationally recognized teacher and very sought after speaker on the issues of aging, employment, and what they call the new retirement. She also is one of the nation's foremost experts in preparing for non-financial aspects of retirement, which if you're in retirement age is really important. She has a biweekly syndicated newspaper column. She's written over 1,000 columns for successful aging over a 20-year period in the Southern California Network Group. Now, I would like to thank both of them for coming today, and I'd like to get us started with some questions. I'll start first with Jeanette. I'm going to ask you the same questions, but we'll go back and forth on that with the two of you. And the first question I have for you is basically, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into the field of aging? What's your connection to USC? We probably know that better about you, Jeanette, but will you go ahead?
Well, back in the day, my daughter was off at USC, and I heard that you could get free tuition at USC. That's how I found out all about it. We had been following USC football for years and years and years. And when our daughter finally got in, we were just so excited about it that I started interviewing and I landed a job. Actually, I'm looking at your screen right now. I spent 10 years in that building right there in the Union building at the Career Center. And my son went to USC. I ended up with a couple of extra graduate degrees from USC, and I can't say enough about my wonderful experience there. So when I ended up with a doctorate in my 50s, one of the women in management at USC grabbed me and said, "Would you like to work at the Emeriti Center and be the new executive director?" I had no idea what the center was about. I didn't know anything about gerontology, and I had a crash course in what it was all about when I started being the director. And I met Helen early on and was totally in awe of her. She and Bernice had, I guess, when I met her, I think it was just before they published their book. And she was an author and just amazing. And so she started a couple of times. We had these wonderful conversations, and I invited her to do workshops at the Emeriti Center for the retirees. And she also did a research project with us. So, Helen, I think you need to tell your story, not me tell mine.
Now, yours is a good story.
Great story.
Um, I kind of backed into the field and backed into USC. So I was in graduate school, getting a master's in clinical psychology. And the subject I was, well, let's backtrack. I didn't know what to decide, what should my topic. So I wander in the library and I pick up a book by Warner Scheib, who was an esteemed researcher on the issues of cognition and aging. And that was the title of the book. And I thought, wow, I never, cognition and aging. So I went to my committee, and at that time, this is going to be hard to believe, no one on my committee felt they knew enough about aging to determine whether my thesis topic was meritorious, sufficiently meritorious. So they said, go to USC. They have this, I don't know, gerontology center. Went to USC, thought it was a gift from God. A professor spent an hour with me. He thought my idea was great. So I ended up, as I say, backing into the field. I should also add, my father-in-law was terminally ill with cancer, and it was in a long-term care facility. And so I visited him daily, although health is not my main area. I experienced some hands-on aging, and I also had the academic aging. And I put those together, and at the same time, the Gerontology Center at USC used to hold something called the Summer Institute. It's where people from around the country came to the gerontology. Now, this is the mid 70s. Okay, this is called the dark ages in gerontology. And they asked me, it was written, if I would teach one day in the Summer Institute. I said, I'd love to. And then there was two mental health grants that no one seemed to have time for. And they said, well, would you like to pick up these two grants? I'd love to. And the rest is history. And so, it worked into more of a full-time commitment and passion. And I want to add one thing. I had opportunities at USC, which were so extraordinary. That was when Dr. James Buren was dean. And it was a period in aging of new ideas. And if you could provide a reason to do it, you could do it. I mean, it was just this fertile, open area. So I was lucky that I entered at that time. So that is a little longer than usual, but so I backed into it and never had one bit of regret. That's my story, part of my story.
These are great stories. But we're talking about renewment tonight. People look, you don't find renewment in the dictionary. Tell us a bit about, what it means and how you came about coming up with that concept.
So I'm going to go back to 1999. Making this short, I got a phone call from my colleague, Bernice Browder, who was just going through her second retirement. And her question was, Helen, is there anything done for women who have felt passionate about their work, strong identity, moving into retirement? She says, I'm having a hard time. I said, Bernice, we're not on anyone's agenda, and I don't think anyone cares. So she said, could we get together and talk? It was a 4-hour lunch. She said, well, maybe we should get some people together at my house. It was a 4-hour dinner. And we decided we would meet once a month to talk about that transition from work to retirement, such as Who am I without my business card? What does productivity mean? What if he or she retires first, etc.? He had no intention of growing. Then some folks from the West Side said, gee, can we join your group? You know, it's hard to join in middle. I'll help you start a group. And then another group said, can we? Well, 35 to 40 groups grew virally throughout the country. Now, this almost last section of this, the pandemic hits. People can't meet face to face. So we said, well, let's make up something else. The renewment roundtables on Zoom. Well, that filled up. There was a waiting list and a waiting list. And so at one point we had 100 women from across the country participating in conversations that matter for mid to later life women going through mid to later life stages. So that's kind of where we are. There's more to the AARP article, but I want to stop there because I know you have other questions. But that's I would say a 25-year overnight success.
Okay. It's incredible concept too. Well, let's look at, you mentioned, the midlife, the transition here. And what have you learned from Renewment that can apply to midlife and older adults going through the transition and change to retirement? And does that apply? Does that apply just from work to retirement?
I want to defer to Jeanette, but I want to add one other thing.
Go ahead.
We're never finished talking. Renewment, what does it do? It inspires and supports career women through transition and change from work to retirement and beyond. And as long as there's transition and change, there's no graduation. So, Jeanette, to you.
Well, I don't know what to say about that. I've seen a lot of folks that have been in their transition piece through the Emeriti Center. But one thing I do want to say is Helen is a treasure. She's been sort of like, you have the Dear Abby, right? People used to call in or write in, and so Helen has 20 years of people writing in and asking questions about the transition to retirement, about what happens in retirement, about aging, all of that. And so when I met her, it was like gold. And we actually did a project with faculty, staff, retired and not retired, men and women, retired and not retired. And that was just people on college campuses, but it does apply across the board, I would say. And so many people were just fearful of retiring that they just don't tell me about it. I don't want to talk about it. It's far away. It's far away. In fact, at USC, when we talk to faculty about retiring, we call it early retirement, even if they're in their 80s or their 90s. It's early retirement. So people are fearful. They don't know what to expect. They don't know how to prepare and that kind of thing. And the ones that seem to be most successful are the ones that have had a multitude of interests outside of work. Helen, if you'd like to take that piece and kind of go with it a little bit.
There's something else I remember about that project, and that is that the maintenance people felt as connected to USC as the faculty.
Yes.
They had the same angst, anxiety about leaving their world. So it really didn't matter socioeconomic level. It was this commitment to the university. And that was a wonderful surprise.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jeanette, what did you ask?
Oh, I just thought that through the course of the research that you've done and all the folks that you've spoken to in front of big corporations, you've done workshops and all of that. But what are some of the things that, other than the fear of retirement, that have come up when you've worked with these folks from all over
So what often is, what am I going to do? And often what I've asked folks is, what are the goodies of your work? What do you love most about it? Make a list. Circle the ones that you love. And then think about if that's still a high value, how will you substitute for those? I mean, if you love teaching, if you loved working with young people, if you loved research, how do you think you can satisfy that value, that goal? So use of time. Um, what people don't talk about is as much is relationships. That seems to be it is such an important part. You can have the best financial plan, but if you're not happy with your state in life or your partner, you need to have a conversation. Particularly, what I found couples did never considered is what happens when they're both facing each other every morning and maybe lunchtime, and oh my goodness, and dinner too. I mean, when is he or she leaving the house? That's never talked about, and yet it's such an important part. So I would say time, relationships, people are very concerned, not at the early stages of pre-retirement, but mid to later is relocation. Relocation. What happens? What happens if all of a sudden I'm alone? What happens if I have I have arthritis and I can't do the stairs? When is the right time to move? And where should I move? That's always a big one too. Um, so those are concerns. I think folks are more comfortable talking about money. Money is critical. That is the keystone. And it's if you do a spreadsheet and add up the numbers, usually you'll get the same results. When you talk about you can talk about the same thing 20 times and you will come away with a different message. So the subjective part actually is more complex. I will add, for some people, it's a non-issue. It's a non-issue. I'm retiring. I know exactly what I want to do. I've had this plan forever. But there are a growing number. There are a growing number who say, I have 20 to 30 years ahead of me. What do I do? How do I find myself? Where do I go with myself intellectually, socially, spiritually? The last thing I want to say, we are not practiced. We're not trained to think about what happens after our work. We're very trained to think about the next step on education and masters or doctorates and job opportunities. But then we kind of fall off the cliff. It's not part of our developmental education. So when people get to this point, many feel that they're at a precipice, yet completely unprepared. So that's a little bit, Jeanette, what I've observed people are concerned about.
Definitely. And we throughout the years would have panels of people who have retired, and we tried to mix it up, men, women, those who were a little bit older, those who were a little bit younger, and all that kind of thing. And one of the things that really touched me or just hit my heart was one of the faculty members was saying, we had all these wonderful plans, and then all of a sudden my wife had Alzheimer's and died. And so he became and I've heard this from a lot of different people. Um, or something wonderful happens. I mean, it's not always that illness and that kind of thing, but you've got to be resilient and you have to be ready to change because that's the only thing you can depend on is change. So, not that you need to be a worrywart and try to figure out all the different bad scenarios, but that just be prepared that things may change and that you can go off in another direction. The other thing that I have observed is those people who are curious, those people, if you look at the tagline for the Alumni Association, lifelong, lifelong and worldwide, but it's lifelong learning is what it is. We're connecting with one another, which is hugely important. We're networking with one another, which is hugely important. We continue to be learning. So that curiosity of learning, trying new things, I've noticed that people that do that seem to be happier in their retirement.
I want to add to that, Jeanette, in terms of concerns. So when I did this retirement education, I met with people one time. But with Renewment, we have small, enduring communities of women, and we meet over and over again. And the observation is that people are, and this is not rocket ship science, people are concerned about different things depending on the life stage. And so, let's say pre-retirement, going into work, it could be productivity and identity. Moving along the life course, it could be more practical things of caregiving, relocation. Towards late 70s and 80s, our observation, and this is women, and I might guess it applies to men, are concerned about health. They're concerned about who will be there for me if something happens to me, and concerned about dementia. It seems to be like the quiet fear that sits with everyone. But that is I think that dementia is feared more than cancer. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the fears. And when you have a fear, sometimes you don't like to acknowledge it, so you don't talk about it. And the last one is a bit more existential, particularly in later life, such as, what difference has my life made? What has been my footprint? What legacy am I leaving to my children, the world, the community, the university, the world? And so these kinds of existential questions come up. So they seem to come up depending on the life stage. And that's what we have observed in the renewment groups, because we meet with them very frequently.
Do you think, in terms of men and women, how do they handle retirement? Do they handle them differently?
I'll defer to Jeanette. Do you want to start with it?
I was gonna defer to Helen because she is more familiar with the men's transition network and whatnot. But we actually, I have observed that um, women talk, women share a little bit more, and they're willing to be a little bit more vulnerable. And when they are with each other, they share their resources and they brainstorm, and and that seems to um, make it a little bit easier. They're also, it seems like they have more things going on in their lives. They've balanced a lot of different things. So when the retirement piece hits, it's a little bit easier because they have a lot of other interests and that kind of thing. Men, especially the ones that I've noticed at USC, tend to be very focused on their jobs, serious about their jobs, climbing the corporate ladder, doing research, teaching, those kinds of things. And also, when they are with each other, men with each other, they tend to talk about more superficial things rather than get into the depth of that kind of thing. So I think it's a little bit more difficult for men to do the transition to retirement unless they have something to retire to. It's really important not to retire from, but to retire to something.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you, Jeanette, that men may show less vulnerability. My observation, it just takes men longer to get to the it, whatever the it is. I'll share an experience. I did some work with pre-retirees at Kaiser, and these were all physicians. And we were talking about non-financial issues, and the men talked a lot. I went to the ladies' room, and the women physicians said very little, except when I went into the ladies' room, and they said, "I'm so glad you talked about X," and they started talking about it. So I'd also say there are situations when men and women are together that women may be a little more reticent to speak up about what the concerns are. I'm just quoting maybe just a few experiences. But I remember I had a session with female physicians in the ladies' room to talk about things that they did not talk about in front of their male counterparts.
We're talking about renewment. How did you find fulfillment in retirement? And, what kind of opportunities, well, not just opportunities, challenges, et cetera, do you have?
Do you want me to start, or where do you want
Sure,
to go?
you start, Helen. Go ahead. Your
So
turn.
that's the big question. How can I have a meaningful, purposeful, happy, joyful, healthy life for the next 20 years, 30 years? Well, we're not practiced in this. Okay, so this takes a little bit of risk taking. I would say the first thing is we have to work on ourselves and have to think about ourselves and what is important. To think about what would make a day a great day, but not only a day, because that might be, having coffee and going to a movie. And then what would make a next day? And and I do this with groups, what would you do the first day that you wake up from retirement? And then what would you do 3 months later and 6 months later? So the first thing is to acknowledge you're going to change in what's important to you as you move along the life course. And I say that another piece is, increase awareness and increase your knowledge. Increase your awareness about what's important to you. Increase your knowledge about the community and opportunities. And if you're going to volunteer, finding a good volunteer position is like finding a job. Most of us want to feel we're doing something that's useful, that's kind of aligned with what we like to do and what we can do. And then there's the decision, do I want to do something totally different? Or do I want to do something along the same lines? So if I love teaching, maybe do I want to mentor? And if I was an accountant, maybe I would go in a nonprofit and be a treasurer. So do we want to do something that kind of morphs our career experience? Or do we want to really try something different? The other thing I often think about, if we could incorporate something that would be mainstream, and that's shadowing. I mean, we encourage young people to shadow someone who you think you really like to emulate. So what if in mid to later life we said, well, find someone who's doing something you think you really like. Spend the day with them, not just lunch. Spend the day with them, experience what they're experiencing. So I would go increase awareness, know what's important to you, experiment, take a risk, and then be patient. Sometimes individuals need 3 months, 6 months, a year just to decompress, to travel. But some people find after traveling for a year or two, I'd like to do something else with my life. I'd like to feel I'm making a difference. The last piece I want to add is often it's helpful, and I mentioned before, to look at your work experience. And is there anything you can glean from that as to what you liked or didn't like that you can carry forth into the next chapter? So knowing yourself, take some risks, be informed, be patient, and then live life fully. Live life fully. As we know, there's no guaranteed timeline. And so making the absolute most that you can of every day. So,
And that's really good advice. I was looking at the questions, one of them is, what about transitioning to a second career with less stress? And you just pretty much gave the answer there. I mean, what we could do. And one of the things I go back to also is you were talking about shadowing. I did career counseling for a long time. I still do career coaching here and there. And we have a huge alumni network. And there are many people in fascinating careers who would be very willing to talk to others about what they love about their job and what they don't like about their job. And so that would be another way to learn a little bit more about maybe a second career or ways that you could maybe either volunteer or take a little piece of, go off in another direction. But one of the things too also that's in these questions is ageism. And Helen just you did a wonderful Q&A interview recently, if you'd like to talk about that with ageism, and maybe how we can fight back.
So that was a conversation with Ashton Applewhite, who is a force of nature. She is an anti-ageism warrior. She wrote a book, This Chair Rocks. She's known nationally and internationally. And ageism, another big piece. So ageism occurs not only in the workplace, but it also can occur in volunteer environments. And this is, I'm looking at our time, just the sidebar. I was part of a board, and just to give you an example. I was part of a board and we needed a new membership chair. And so someone raised their hand and said, we need a young, forceful, creative, energetic membership chair. I raised my hand. I said, would we consider a midlife or older, creative, energetic membership chair? And the board went silent. So ageism is just systemic and endemic. And what can we do about it? One of them is to speak up politely, to be very aware. And I would just shift over to the workplace. Ageism exists, but there's also, there's also responsibility for employees to be up to date, to be able to communicate, to be flexible, and to meet the objectives of the organization. So I object when ageism is called when it's really inappropriate, but most often it's very subtle. I've done a fair amount of expert witness work on large age discrimination suits. It's sometimes subtle and not so subtle. By the way, that cases are very hard to, well, you're the attorney, Trish, but cases are very hard to win right now because you may be aware of a Supreme Court ruling that said age has to be the only reason for someone getting fired or employed. Not the economy, not the management, but age has to be the reason. And since then, there are fewer cases. And also, I think the EEOC, which enforces it, has changed its profile. So getting back to your question, yes, so ageism is a big one. And I think women, this may be sexist, women worry about it a little bit more because fortunately or unfortunately, how you look seems to play a role in people's visceral reaction on what you can do or who you are. And we still fight that. As we say, when men turn gray, they are distinguished and handsome. And when women turn gray is, gee, I didn't know you were that old. So it's an overstatement, but it's very much like, and it's feared. It's feared. You have men getting cosmetic surgery, coloring their hair. They're doing it for more than aesthetic reasons, not to look too old.
You're talking about generally to all of us in your audience, but how have you incorporated the concepts of renewment in your own lives? Helen, you want to start because you're the one that started the renewment. You know what I'm saying?
I
Personally.
Okay. So, first of all, I have increased my value and appreciation of women and women in groups. Love men, but this is about women. And this is particularly the experiences with renewment, the sense of community, honesty, sharing, learning is very highly appreciated. But I think what one big takeaway for me is I think I live my life more intentionally. I'm pretty clear now on what's important to me and what has come back time and time again is I need to feel that I make a difference somewhere. And my age or life stage hasn't changed that. So that's a big takeaway. That's a big realization. And that my life stage, as long as I can do it mentally and physically, I need to feel that. It's feeling that you matter. And Jeanette and I had a big discussion on mattering, feeling that you matter, feeling you make a difference. I'm more aware about the challenge of balance. I have a friend who says, stop fighting it. There's no such thing as balance. That kind of made me feel better. But the notion of balancing your work and your community and your friends and your family, I would say that I'm more aware of that, and I'm more intentional. So I think those are some, but the biggest, well, and certainly the value of friends and family, but the awareness is I have to feel that I'm doing something of value somewhere. So that's part of it. Jeanette, it's your turn.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that you said, Helen. And I Helen and Bernice wrote Project, Renewment, the new retirement model for women, and it has so many nuggets of value, and I knew about it and I talked about it and all that, but I didn't really participate until something like 5 years ago, during COVID. And the community of women from all walks of life and different parts of the country were so candid and vulnerable. And it made me feel like, oh, well, I'm not the only one with imposter syndrome. I'm not the only one, and it just gave me a little bit more courage. It made me feel more relaxed. Um, I knew that if I had an emergency and I really need to know something, there's this group of women that have these connections and resources, and they're just willing to share. Um, I was so excited about the two groups that I was in with Helen and Bernice that I thought, oh, when I retire, I'm going to just start a group at USC. Let's just throw it out there. And I just threw out an email, and a bunch of women showed up, and now we have a core of about 10 women. The majority of them are faculty at USC. Some are still there, some are transitioning, and the rest are retired. And we met in person today. And it was, uh, to be honest, we're supposed to stick to an hour. They all voted, we got to do at least an hour and a half next time. And there's always a different topic, but we check in with each other. And the support of just a few words, if one person is suffering from one thing, another one is off jet setting to some island somewhere. I mean, they're all doing different things, and yet we empathize and we share with one another, and we know that if we ever need anything, that group would be there to help us. And it's not a support group, but guess what? It just sort of turns out that way and we didn't all know each other either. So it's just amazing what magic happens when you have a group of people that come together and talk about important topics, share, and are vulnerable. And I just think community is wonderful, really makes a difference.
And I think, Jeanette, that sense of community is so paramount. I'm sure we're acquainted with Dan Buettner and his blue zones and the importance of the environment. When we can create an environment where I would say good things can happen organically, but it is the environment that is safe and nurturing and honest, shared values, that organically things happen. They don't have to be programmed. I want to give a bit of time. I want to give just one example. In Renewment, we had a woman that was moving from Palos Verdes to the the Palm Desert, newly widowed. We had a real estate agent and actually a psychologist all in one who said, "Oh, I can help you find a house." And within 2 weeks, the woman went from Palos Verdes to Palm Springs or Palm Desert, found the house, and they became best friends. Another person said, I'm starting a business. Someone else said, I'm running a seminar on entrepreneurship in later life. Come to my seminar. So I say, it's Woody Allen, 80% of life is showing up. If you show up and you create an environment that allows things to happen, that's all I can say, that things can happen organically. I believe strongly in groups, and this applies to men as well as women. And that means reaching out and connecting. And I think the connection is so important. My last comment is we know isolation is a national epidemic for young and old. And these groups, whether they're men or women or just a couple, it fights that isolation, it prevents it, and it helps us form community, which unfortunately we have to somewhat manufacture today because they don't happen as organically as they have. I'm basically optimistic about the future for in particular this area.
Your comments are great. We're going to go into the Q&A session. Before we do that, I have to let everybody know that today AARP had an online article on renewment. Now this isn't going to show because of their mirror image. It probably won't show at all. But this is, oh no, and I've got, anyway, I think maybe we'll have that. But we've got like a 7 or 8 page, well, I don't know, it comes out that way in the online article on renewment. So it's becoming known all over the country, and with AARP, they'll be aware of it too. People will be aware of it and the things that are going on. And also talking about, as I said, our time is getting limited and I want us to be able to go to the Q&As. And I don't know, do we have some interesting questions there that should be interested in answering? I'm looking here, we got here. Okay, I've got here.
Okay, well, what about transitioning to a second career with less stress? The answer is yes. Yes, it's an important option. And let's look further. Oh, yeah. Please forward the questions. Good to have a side job. Yes. It's good to do something on the side job with a passion to fill the retirement life. Is it good? Yes, it is. I think the ideal is while you're working, if you can develop the relationships and the activities while you're working, so that when you retire, you kind of ease into them and you don't feel adrift. So people are usually very busy working full time, but if you can work that into your time, relationships outside of work and activity outside of work can help that transition. Well, do you want to do this one? How to deal with the fact that women mostly will outlive their husbands. How do you live well alone? I am alone. Jeanette, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Being alone, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think community is super important. And so for me, I've got so many friends and colleagues and activities and those kinds of things that that I feel like I'm never really alone. But I think that the time that I was all by myself during COVID,
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to what Helen said, and that is mattering. Purpose and matter. How can you matter and that kind of thing. And so for me, whenever I got to the point where I was feeling kind of lonely or alone, then I would reach out and do something nice for somebody else and connect with somebody else. And that made all the difference. So
that's a beautiful way to look at that.
It is.
Wonderful. There is now a term called solo agers. And these are people who have no partner or children. And so there's books written on it now and some support groups. I happen to be a widow for 23 years. Um, that's hard to prepare for. And I would say what's most important is know something about your money and your investments and where you keep things. Um, how to live well and live well alone. It's not easy. Depends the kind of loss. If you maybe never had a partner, or if your partner passed away, or divorced, or separated. Um, the relationships often that backtrack. Let's talk about women per se. If a woman's entire life has been caught up with her partner, who I'll assume for a moment is a male, everything is around this man. When he dies, she is a mess. She does not know what to do with herself. And I think if relationships can be such that a woman feels she also has a life with a mate, but also can stand up for herself, it helps. Um, being alone and being surprised at being alone is a tough transition. No one really emotionally plans for that. So, and I would assume many of the people who are with us on this call can identify with it. I do recall my sister, who also became a widow, said, "Here's my advice to you, Helen. Do not turn down any invitation. Even if you don't kind of like the person, just go, show up, say yes. Be an initiator, invite people over, do something, don't stay in." So those are just kind of scotch tape or band-aid kinds of things, but it gets you out. And it can take a long time. But the preparation for me is certainly financial, but having something to do with just you, whether that's a man or a woman, I think is helpful. So I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts on that, Jeanette? It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. And I think that one thing that comes to mind, and I was listening, I can't remember what I was listening to recently, and that is, oh, I don't want to I don't want to bother so and so. I don't want to call so and so or whatever. Or that friend never calls me anymore. And am now making a concerted effort. If there is someone that I really enjoy, an old friend, a colleague, or whatever, I will reach out and I will invite them to lunch. I will drive out there and meet with them or whatever it is. And I started, this is my thing for 2026. All the friends and colleagues that I super enjoyed. And what I'm finding is I have become the initiator. They always accept my invitation, or they always, reciprocate or whatever for the most part. Those that don't, oh well, I'll move on. But I'm not so set in, oh, well, she hasn't called me back. No, I'll just give her a call and see how she's doing. And there's one person that I know that I do all the initiating. But you know what? It makes me feel so good to make her feel good to know that she matters, you know? We talk about mattering, and I say, it's not so much that I matter. I want to let other people know that they matter. They matter to me. And that just brings a smile to their face.
So Jeanette, the people that always say yes to you, it's most of them because they want to be with you, Jeanette. That's why they say yes.
Well, the other thing that I also try to do is, and that's very sweet, is to surround myself with positive people. And sadly, I've had to let go of some friends who were just too negative, too much, into the downside. And life is too short.
And that just brings to mind this whole concept, and we talked about this once several times in our groups, this notion of radical acceptance. If you're a doer, the assumption is that if you're rational, smart, you can figure it out and solve the problem. Well, I guess this could be a mid to later life epiphany. There's some problems you can't solve.
Yeah.
There's some family relationship problems that you can't solve. There's sometimes health problems that you can't solve. And this concept of radical acceptance, I think, is maybe it comes with maturity. I don't think it's easy, but I think the longer we live, the more we are confronted with some things that we actually can't change. And if you're kind of programmed to be a fixer, a problem solver, that can be very frustrating and can be very hard to accept. But I think this is part of life, and maybe that moves into wisdom.
I would like to thank both of you very much for your really fascinating presentation. You're both incredible women. As I said, we could keep you here for a long, long time, but we have a short period of time, and this is just about it. So I want to thank you very much on behalf of the Half Century Trojans as half of USC. I'd also like to thank Roberta Watson, who's in the background, who helped us organize from the Alumni Association, who's helping as a tech person too. And to Grace Sheba, who's in the background that you don't see, who's also our tech person. If you enjoyed tonight, I hope that I want to invite you to participate in some of our Half Century Trojan activities that are coming up. And we've got a screen over there that's telling you, so they've even got more things than I know. They're talking about our gerontology workshop on February 27th at 3 o'clock. Going back to College Day, which is going to be, now it's going to be spread out to all the alumni, not just the seniors, on March 6th. The Alumni Day of Service on March 21st. The Orange County Speaker Series, which is our annual general meeting where we also have a speaker. We have it in Orange County, and that will be on April 22nd. And then the thing that those of us in Half Century Trojans, I think, find one of the most fun events, and this is just for Half Century Trojans. You others are welcome to come to these other activities, but this one, we march in the commencement. And this year we'll be marching in the commencement in the LA Memorial Coliseum at 6:30 on May 14th. So, those are things to consider because we've got a great group. We've got good activities. We'd love to have you join us. There's a lot of you out there in that category. Next week, you're going to be receiving a link that will have this recording. So anybody who signed up for the session will be getting that link. You're also going to be getting a survey, which we hope you will fill out so we can see what you thought of our program and get ideas for things that we can do at another time on similar topics. And now, basically, to end our program, we're going to have a slide with a picture, a picture of that beautiful cover for Helen's book, Project Renewment. And I hope that this has helped you and given you some ideas about, potential possibilities as either you're transitioning into retirement, you're into retirement, or for some of us who've been in retirement for a long time, some good thoughts. So thank you very much for attending tonight. And we enjoyed presenting this to you.